That's it. Like people just shout over each other all the time. And that's the way that conversations happen. So you build these kinds of ground rules that create a space of trust and respect and create a space of openness and honesty. Is so much damage that the situation does to so many of us to like put us in these sort of places where we're like, no, I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. It's too threatening to the way that I view the world because I've had to build all these walls around myself to protect myself.
What happens when music becomes a catalyst for change, a force that unites communities divided by conflict? Micah Handler, a visionary who blends harmony and humanity, has redefined how we think about peace building, inclusion, justice, and equality. As the founder and leader of the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, Micah brings together Israeli and Palestinian youth to uncover common ground, build trust, and create harmony using music to bridge one of the world's deepest divides. But this isn't just a story about melodies and notes, it's about courage, compassion, and the belief that voices raised together can heal even the most fractured hearts. Today, we dive into the extraordinary journey of Micah Handler, singer, conductor, composer, arranger, speaker, facilitator, and so much more. So much wisdom. Come on, let's meet him and learn together. Welcome, everyone. I am so grateful to have Micah Handler with me today. Micah, welcome. I
Thank you.
appreciate you. And I said it off camera, I'll say it again. I appreciate you giving me your time and your energy. I know you've been swamped with your projects that you're working on, but I would like our audience to really understand who you are. So, would you give me a little bit about your background and where you grew up and all of that so that they really understand who are they listening to?
Totally. And Rima, I want to say right back at you, I'm really happy that we have the opportunity to just have this conversation. I really just felt such deep resonance, even just in the few words that we've gotten to share before this conversation. So I'm just really, really grateful. Thank you for your time and energy and wanting to amplify the work that I'm doing and that we are doing with the Jerusalem Youth Chorus in particular. Um, yeah, so I think of myself as a musical bridge builder, musical change maker of different kinds, and really someone who is trying to tap into the power of music as a container builder, as a way of creating a sense of community and shared identity and allowing for really transformative processes to happen even on very, very divisive issues in very, very hard times. And that holds in Israel Palestine, where I do most of my work with the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, but it also holds in North America and in Europe and everywhere. I mean, seemingly right now, the world is facing so much hyperpolarization around every topic, seemingly. Israel Palestine being like a particularly hyper polarizing topic, but it's not the only one. And it's so corrosive to our ability as human beings to see one another as human beings and to solve problems. And so hoping that music can be a tool, not an exhaustive tool, but like a first step and maybe a couple other steps also towards helping people to regain access to their own and one another's humanity and see one another as potential partners instead of as enemies in a lot of cases. So I came to do this or want to do this or strive to do this really naturally as a result of the most powerful experiences that I had growing up. I grew up in Washington, D.C., and there were really sort of two threads of my life that were most profound in my, teenage and before that years. One was just music as a way of finding place and finding community, connecting with others, belonging. Um, and the other was dialogue as a form of conflict transformation. And growing up, I was a really awkward kid and I was bullied a lot and really didn't fit in most places, actually, really anywhere other than where people were singing. And in groups of people who were singing, I fit in, I belonged, I felt celebrated, I felt like I could contribute something that people wanted. And I really was part of a group, part of something bigger than myself. Um, in contrast to being sort of excluded in many other contexts. So that was like a very important fundamental knowledge point really that I had growing up, was like, if I'm singing with other people, I can belong.
Mhm.
When I was then in high school, I saw that I actually had the power to create that belonging for other people by starting my own singing group. That, like, if I created a group of people who are singing just by being like, hey, we should like sing together or whatever, all of a sudden there was a new circle of friends that hadn't existed before. And the idea that like I actually could wield that power was very, very cool, and use it to create this space, not just for myself, but for others, particularly others who may think that they are not singers. Right. So like this
Mhm.
idea of music, and particularly singing, being like such a low barrier to entry way of expressing as a human, and as something that is just so fundamentally connective when used in the right way. And so that was kind of one thread. And the other really has to do with Israel Palestine and my own sort of growing up in a Jewish community in DC that was like very, very one-sided in terms of what I learned, and what I was taught and what I was told about others, who, of course, whom I'd never met. But the way that these narratives are painted, I would argue both Israeli and Palestinian narratives, in their sort of essence, as they've been crafted as national narratives, are painted in a way as to be totally airtight and completely exclusive of one another, right? So this, I see you nodding. So
Yes.
the idea that like I didn't know that I was missing anything. There was no holes. I wasn't like, oh, but what about? I was like, there was an answer to every question, right? Within this bubble.
Hmm.
And so it wasn't until I really participated in a dialogue process and like met Palestinians and heard from their life experiences things that directly contradicted things that I was being taught about them. Then I was like, wait a minute, what's going on? And I could see that like this thing that I thought was the sky was just this box that I was in that was painted to look like the sky, right? And so I was like, and that was really, really profound for me, the way that I saw that my own mind had been closed by my education, and the way that process of meeting someone else as a human being in a context that was designed to bring out not only like all the things that we have in common, as we both like hummus or whatever, but like the things that we don't have in common and the ways in which we can learn about the realities in the world through one another's experience, in a context of trust. And so that was kind of this other thread that I experienced. And I saw in that context that music actually could also play a vital role, doing the same kinds of things that I had seen outside happen in this context where people ostensibly have nothing in common and are supposed to be enemies. but that in creating these opportunities for people to sing together, to have this kind of a ritual of togetherness, that it actually, does mental, psychological, neurological impact on the feeling of togetherness. Like it releases oxytocin and you feel like, okay, now I like trust you more because we were like singing together. It's like a thing. And so I saw that again, it's not like, okay, we're all gonna like get together and sing and then like solve the conflict, but like it creates more trust in which these conversations can happen in a deeper way and can happen without maybe needing to first peel back all of the layers to get to the core by arguing with each other, which is like a very bad way of doing it, right? So the music is a sort of a bit of a softening into these kinds of really transformational spaces. So I saw the way that these things could combine. I pursued that. I studied Arabic. I studied Arabic music. I went to Damascus actually the summer before the war, and that's really where I learned my Arabic and learned about tarab and learned how to sing quarter tones and washahat and like all that stuff, and had the most extraordinary experiences there. And then went to Jerusalem to basically do field work for my senior thesis. At that point, I was at Yale studying music and international studies and was writing my senior thesis on basically, is it possible to combine music and dialogue in this way on the ground in Jerusalem in a sustained way? And was looking at like, is that possible? Like, can you do it? And then by the time I finished my thesis, I decided that I should probably try to give it a shot. The thesis was inconclusive, but I decided that I wanted to try. And so I moved to Jerusalem basically a month after graduating from college to found the Jerusalem Youth Chorus to really put this into action. And that was now 12 and a half years ago, which is kind of insane. And I had a lot more hair at that time, and less of it was gray. And I think both of those things are correlated to the work. And also, yeah, it was kind of an extraordinary journey that we've had. And at this point, the chorus has become so much more than just this idea that I had. It's now really a community, and a community that in many ways is owned by the singers themselves. And that's just been the most amazing thing to see as we've been meeting throughout this war every week. And the singers are so dedicated to each other and to the place that they have together and what they're able to do and what their voices are able to reach, and the way that they are able to be heard in this process, both within and also in the world as a result of what we do in the chorus. And so that's been extremely, extremely gratifying. And particularly this past year, like to have been shepherding the chorus through this time together with our executive director, Amir, who is one of our Palestinian graduates, whom I've known for 10 years. And he joined as a 16-year-old who had never sung before. And now he and I are co-leading this organization. And so that's just been incredible to have his partnership.
I have so many questions for you, but I'll
Lovely.
start with thank you. Shukran. I will start with let's go back to high school and your first ability to actually communicate with someone that is different than what you've grown up with. And what was that process? And what did you really grab out of that? Because I can tell you from my experience of simply moving from Lebanon to the States, and the first classroom I was in, there were two young kids from Israel. They were my best friends. And that was just like enlightening because you
Right.
hear the words like we're enemies, like we're not enemies. These are my
Like
friends.
I like them though.
We
Yeah,
joke, we laugh, we can understand each other, even if it's just sign language at times.
totally.
So would you take me back to that first seed of where you started to like open up and question? And what was that like? So that for the ones that are out there that look at the world as there's only one right way to do things and one wrong way to do things, for us to start to open up minds towards something
Totally.
bigger.
Yes, yes, please. Um, yeah, so going into dialogue for the first time, I had no idea really what was actually going to happen. I knew that there would be Israelis and Palestinians in the room and like teenagers who were my age, and I knew that, I wanted to be sort of a bridge. Like I didn't go in feeling like, oh, I want to like go fight on, on behalf of the Israelis or whatever. I was like, I want to like be friends with everyone and like be helpful and whatever, but like I didn't actually realize how skewed my own background and education was. Like, because I didn't know what I didn't know,
Hmm.
right? Until I realized that I didn't know it. And so but it was important that I went in with that intention. Like that was very helpful because it enabled things to happen more quickly and people to trust me with their stories also, because I wasn't trying to like, my goal in dialogue was to like ask questions and not to like say facts. So I had that sort of advantage, but again, like I knew all the facts from one side, facts, right? And but I didn't feel like my goal was to say them. Like I really just wanted to like be open and learn and be helpful and whatever. But even so, even for people who did come in saying like, no, my goal is to represent my people and the government and we're in this war and da 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 da, it's also transformational in many ways for people who come like that, and in a lot of ways even more so because they have an even bigger sort of 180 often in this process. But for me, it was really, I think, the key that I come back to is like I was just taught fundamentally growing up and in a Jewish school and in my synagogue and from my family and all these different things, that basically anyone who had a grievance like with Israel, it was basically just because they were anti-Semitic and hated Jews. Period. That there was basically like no real criticism of Israel that wasn't rooted in hatred of Jews because they're Jewish. That's it. And that's what I was taught. And when there was a moment in my first sort of dialogue group that I was in, where I remember one of the Palestinians in the group talking about how his cousin was shot by an Israeli soldier while playing soccer, like shot for no reason while playing soccer, and died. And he was like, look, I don't care what religion you are. You can be Muslim, you can be Jewish, you can be Christian, you can be Buddhist. Like, I don't give a fuck. But like, how do you want me to feel about the government of Israel right now that like killed my cousin for no reason? And I was like, that's not what I thought you thought. Right. And
Mm.
like, of course, I didn't know about any situations like that. And and just the way that he said it just like directly disproved this huge thing that I had been taught that was a frame for everything else.
Mm.
Right. That there was this tent pole that one of the most fundamental ways that certainly like the Israeli narrative like deflects criticism is by basically labeling it all fundamentally anti-Semitic and therefore invalid and therefore we shouldn't consider it, right?
Mm.
And a lot of criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic and a lot of it is not. And that was not, part of the discussion certainly that I learned growing up. And this story just like was a direct counter to that whole thing, which then was like, wait a minute, but like, if that's not true, then like maybe this other thing that you're telling me also I need to like let in and really absorb because like that's probably also coming from like a real lived experience that you just told me the story of. So it's like, and I see you like crying while you're telling me the story, and this is not some like propaganda trick. You're like a 14-year-old who experienced some horrible things. And like I know you because you're my friend. And like that's like a fundamentally different space than so many of the conversations that are happening right now, both between people who are experiencing trauma directly as a result of this war and people who are not, or people who are experiencing like lowercase t trauma because it's hard or they feel uncomfortable or unwelcome or whatever, but like their family isn't like actually dying or they're not refugees or whatever is going on. Um, and so the creation of that space was so magical. I felt like it was sort of like that it had the power to sort of disenchant my thinking. And so within the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, like we're using music as a way of getting people in the room, as a way of getting people comfortable with each other, and like as a platform to then have a message that we can spread. But the core of the transformation is professionally facilitated dialogue work.
Mm.
Right. So we're not just like doing singing and being like, that's enough. It's like singing is step one and step three, but
Mm-hmm.
the meat in the sandwich is dialogue. Like that's like where the real like work happens. And we've just seen all the different ways in which it's become such a vital thing, both as a proactive educational tool, but also as a protective tool for the chorus itself, like as a way of processing conflict and a way of having a space in the group to actually talk about hard things when they come up instead of ignoring them and then having them blow up in your face.
You say so many incredible things that people sometimes miss, that when you're talking directly with someone that you know and you hear their story, their real life story, it's very different than, I'm going to say the word,
An argument. Yeah.
the propaganda that it, we're taught in
Yes.
every form. I don't care what religion you are, I don't care what region you, there's propaganda that goes on beyond what is real between humans,
Yeah.
that all of a sudden when you have that conversation you go, they're in pain just like I would be, they're real tears just like I would have, and what would I react? That gives me goosebumps. All of a sudden it takes away a lot of this dogma, all of this stuff that is crammed in
Yeah.
from, we'll call them leaders, but I wouldn't call them
Right.
leaders, but we'll call it leadership. But what I'd
Yeah.
love to really hone in on is you taking this idea, because you went through Seeds of Peace and then
Mm.
you went and you learned music and you got an international also degree. And then you took this theory and you hit the ground in Israel. I mean, you come from the United States. Everything is comfy here. Yes, we have challenges, but we don't have the things that they're dealing
Totally.
with. What was it like for you to even arrive and launch this?
Mm. Yeah, it was a big challenge and a huge adventure, but like much more serious than that. Like I had a lot of adventures, I would say, in sort of exploring all of this, and the lead up to founding the chorus, or like the adventures I had in Damascus, like learning Arabic and hitchhiking across the desert and to random monastery and like but like all these adventures in Arabic. And like that was the point of my being there, was to just like have these experiences and meet people and learn the language and the culture and the music and the food. And all the different beautiful, beautiful things that I experienced. Um, but it was interesting when I went to Jerusalem to found the chorus, I explicitly sort of turned off sort of that part of my brain that was like, oh, I need to be like keeping a diary of my adventures. Like it was like, no, I'm like here to do work. I'm here to live life. I'm here to like root something. And so that was really important. And I came with a lot of determination and a lot of unwillingness to accept defeat.
Mm.
So I was kind of relentless about it. And there were a lot of opportunities where a reasonable attempt would fail. Like in fact, almost every case, a reasonable amount of effort would not be sufficient to do this work. Like you have to go to the kind of unreasonable length to actually sustain something like this because the world is not hospitable for projects like this because they go against the dominant power structures and they go against the narratives and they go against even the like a lot of people who want to support projects like this sometimes do it for like other reasons and do it because they actually think that they want you to represent something that isn't what you are trying to do, right? And so to actually sustain something like this, to plant and then sustain something like this in a way that has integrity takes an extremely unreasonable amount of effort. But I was down to like put in that effort. And so I like arrived in Jerusalem and basically spent the first month just having coffee with like everyone I could think of and everyone they recommended I meet. And so I was having like 5, 6 meetings a day for like a month of just like with teachers and musicians and policymakers and activists and people in the municipality and principals and dialogue people and everybody, neighborhood leaders, whoever it was, and um, basically just to learn and to see like where I was and to see like what are the different pitfalls that I should try to avoid. I had already done I had already done 8 years of dialogue work and work before my senior thesis, before arriving in Jerusalem. And I knew Hebrew and I knew Arabic and I knew different musical traditions. So like I had done a lot of homework and there was still so many on the ground just kind of like ways that things work that I just like had no clue and was coming in a very American way of doing things. So like even just around time, right? Concepts of time and planning ahead, right, are just like completely different. Where like it's both, I think, a cultural thing and it's also a product of being in a war zone,
Mm.
right? Where you don't know if you can actually really plan in advance because you don't know what's going to happen next week or tomorrow or in an hour. So you're kind of like more in the moment, or you have to just kind of like see the person walking down the hall and that's how you have your meeting. Whereas if you plan it with them in 2 weeks, it's more likely or not than not that it'll just get canceled. It's like a completely different way of doing things. But so I had to learn stuff like that. But after that first month, then I spent another month and a half just recruiting singers. And I went to every school I could think of and every school that would let me in and basically was just like knocking on the door, would come with my flyers and would basically ask to go class to class and basically pitch the high schoolers on this new thing that didn't exist yet. But basically I was like, I knew from my thesis work, the one thing that I really did learn from my thesis work was looking at the reasons why people join programs like this and seeing that those are not the reasons why people fund projects like this. And they're not the reasons why people start projects like this. And that makes sense. But of course, it's something that you don't think about necessarily until you think about it. So like if I had gone into these schools and was like, hey, we're gonna do this like peace and leadership, da, 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 you're gonna be a peace builder, everyone would be like, what are you talking about? Like, do you go here? Like, clearly not, like get out of my face, right? So I looked at, okay, what are the reasons why a high schooler might want to join this? And like I listed them out. I was like, look, you're going to make new friends. You're going to learn how to sing. You're going to have these incredible experiences internationally. You're going to learn English. You're going to be on the radio. You're going to make music videos. You're going to like write songs. You're going to like do all these things. And maybe you like are curious about like the other people who live in Jerusalem that you haven't had a chance to meet. You get to meet them, right? That was basically my pitch in Hebrew or in Arabic, like on those kids' terms. And I was like, this is going to be the coolest thing you do in high school. And people were like, okay, And so I had conditioned myself in the beginning. I moved in July 2012 to found the chorus, and I knew that it was going to be hard to get kids to join. And so I thought, look, if I have 10 kids by January, I'm doing okay.
Mm.
Like I like really wanted to make sure that I didn't feel defeated if that was the result. I was like, if I have 10 kids by January, I'm doing good work. And by October, we had 80 kids audition. And the majority were from East Jerusalem. And the
Mm.
majority almost every year have been from East Jerusalem, which I think is also like if you only look at the sort of macro political dynamics, you'd be like, that's impossible, right? Because the pressures in East Jerusalem on Palestinians of anti-normalization and all of these things are frankly greater than the pressures against Israelis not to do this work. After October 7th, I'd say a lot has changed, actually, but certainly like until that point, like Palestinians have a much harder time politically in their communities, um, both doing this work and like not getting canceled, basically. Um, and so you'd think like that's an impossible result. But we've seen it every year because we're offering something that's like actually really valuable that's missing in East Jerusalem in so many ways, which is this opportunity to express musically as a person in a group, to learn these leadership skills, to even just like do anything really awesome that's of high quality after school that isn't just homework, right? Whereas in West Jerusalem, we're competing with taekwondo and drama and soccer and like scouts and this and that and the other all on Mondays,
Mm.
you know? So there was just a different need also that we were meeting. And because we were able to show people that we were actually coming to meet these needs that they might have and not be like, we are coming to use you as a political tool, but we're meeting you as a human being who might want to like work on your self-expression and have opportunities to make new friends. People are like, okay. So that's sort of a very long way of answering the question, but it's really vital to, if you're trying to sort of do anything like this, to create any kind of alternative space, to understand that people are coming from different places, which means that you need to meet them where they are and not just say like, well, why isn't anybody coming to meet me? It's like, well, if everyone were already coming to meet you, you wouldn't need to do this, right? If everyone were already doing it, it wouldn't be a problem. So like
Yes.
you need to like, slowly, build the trust, see where people are coming from, do a lot of listening, do that kind of groundwork so that people can then say like, you know what, like what you're doing is different than what I thought, but I like you and I trust you and I see what's in it for me, even with the values I currently have. I see why this is good for me. I'll give it a try.
Now, obviously, they come in for the beautiful reasons that you created for them to come and express themselves and learn music and meet people that they might not have met. But the end results that you guys are creating is what you guys talk about: peace, equality, justice in a world that right now is still in a lot of turmoil. So, what's it like for you and the group as you begin a new group, as kids start to come in and this is all new to them. Besides the music, you said it, it's the dialogue part that gets them thinking and gets them really expressing themselves and breathing. So take us through that so that people understand who these kids are. And you've mentioned it a little bit about the experience here in the United States, but what's it like there where it's turmoil outside?
Yeah. So the way the process works is, again, we have rehearsals that are like a sandwich. So we have start with music and then have a dialogue process and then end with music. So music is sort of this container, as I was
Mm,
mentioning, this glue, this sort of gravitational sort of inward force. And in many ways, dialogue is this sort of outward pushing force, right? That's kind of a little bit explosive and, could easily sort of spin out of control. But they keep each other in balance. Like the dialogue keeps things real and the music keeps things more like human,
hmm
if that makes sense. Um, and so they serve each other in that way. The singers come in and we don't start by like, okay, it's day one, let's like talk about like 1948. It's like that would be really stupid, right? Because people would just yell at each other and throw the headlines that they know at each other. So we generally don't even get to that for months. We start out by creating ground rules as a group. And that's really important because, for example, one of the ground rules that we often discuss is like, is it cool to interrupt somebody? Yes or no? And you'd think like that's kind of dumb. Obviously, you shouldn't interrupt people. But in Jerusalem, if you don't interrupt people, you won't get heard.
Mm.
That's it. Like people just shout over each other all the time. And that's the way that conversations happen. Like even often when you're not fighting with somebody, it's just like it's the way that it goes. And the quiet person will just not get a chance to speak at all. No one's going to be like, oh, what do you think? It's not how it works. And so it's really important in dialogue for the group to decide, like, no, we want people to be able to like be heard through their whole thought without being interrupted. And if the group decides on that, then when things devolve into like more heated argument, the facilitators can be like, hey, like, I thought we said that we weren't going to interrupt each other. So please, like, let your friend finish. And then you can say what you want to say, right? But it's not like I'm the dictator and this you can't interrupt. It's like, no, you said that we shouldn't do this. So you build these kinds of ground rules that create a space of trust and respect and create a space of openness and honesty. And then we start going into values. Again, even at that point, we're not like, okay, now let's talk about these like big ticket polarizing items. We're talking about like, okay, like what is equality? People say, oh, like equality is like really important. And the chorus talks about equality. But it's like, what does that actually mean? And there are different types of equality. And like, what about these, is this type of equality more important than this other kind? And like, in what context? And like, where do you see equality or inequality showing up in your school or in your neighborhood or whatever? And things start getting political. But it's at that point, from the perspective of value language that people have in common where people can talk about like formal versus essential equality or like equality of outcomes and all these different concepts that are shared that apply in different contexts and they can see how the same thing then that they might feel is really important for me to be equal but like you should also get to experience that and then when the person is like yeah but I don't and you're like oh but I don't like that because I want that for you right? Because you're my friend and we're like 4 months into this process and I really care about you. And I hate that your neighborhood has no services and I don't get it. Right. And then we go into like the deeper conflict topics with that foundation of the ground rules and with the foundation of some of these value concepts that then and some work on identity also is like very helpful in the beginning. Like, what are the different parts of my identity? What make me who I am? What make you who you are? What do you value? What do you care about? Like, da 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 da. And then when we're going into this thing and you say something that I think is a bold-faced lie just because I haven't heard it before, or maybe because part of it is a lie, but also what I'm saying is also partially a lie, and I don't know it, then you're like, but I value you and I care about you and I trust you. And maybe this is something that I should learn or listen to or pay attention to instead of just decide that you hate me because of who I am. Maybe you've actually had a life experience that I didn't know existed. So like that's a really important way of just opening up. And the chorus, when we started, every year was such a toss up, in terms of like, is anyone even going to come back next year? Like, are we going to have a chorus next week? Like, everyone can leave at all times. Um, so that was a real question. Like, every year we were kind of being like, okay, what do we do this year? We still have a chorus. Cool. Now, in year 13, and particularly under Amer's leadership, Amer grew up in JYC. So he was in this dialogue process for years with a lot of the same people and seeing and growing with them and seeing how his own and other people's experiences and perspectives changed and evolved and opened. And he learned a lot, but he also had his own insights about like what worked and what didn't,
Mm.
or what could be improved. And so he had this really powerful vision where he said, look, like we need to actually create a tiered, like cumulative curriculum
Right.
where people join in ninth grade and they leave in 12th grade as alumni. And we keep working with them as alumni, but basically in the high school 4 years, they have 4 years of a process that they go through. And at the end, they're equipped with understandings and knowledge and tools and skills and leadership, practice and musical abilities and a self-confidence and a sense of who they are and some language skills and like all these different things that they need to actually do this work as individuals and like for the group to like be able to keep up leveling. So we're now in the process of revitalizing our whole curriculum around this sort of 4 year model. And it's something that I thought we wouldn't really be able to do before because recruiting is so challenging. I was like, we're not going to be able to find enough ninth graders to join,
Mm.
to be able to just bring new ninth graders. We have to take 10th and 11th graders and even 12th graders because otherwise we won't have enough singers, right? That was kind of a reality. But at this point, I just spoke with Amer today. We're just in the process of recruiting right now. And he said that we have like 19 Palestinian kids who have all passed the audition that we want to accept all of them. And now we don't have like space and two on the waiting list.
Wow.
Right. And we have tons of Israelis also who have passed the audition who want to join. And this is now. This is like a year into this war. And so we're really in the process of building that curriculum and building that model. So in year one, singers will do this kind of focusing on the basics and some of the stuff I was talking about, going into the conflict a little bit, but in a bit of a sort of foundational way. Like they'll go into the issues for sure. If someone only gets 1 year, they get a really powerful program. But in year two, we then go deeper, right? And so we start peeling back some of these layers and look at like what's happening, not just in history, but in the present day. And like, what are the big national narratives and how do we complicate them and like all those things. And in year three, we learn about like the systemic stuff that's going on. So like, what are the different systems of power and like how do we situate ourselves within them and how do we affect change in different ways? What is the role of music in affecting change? How can we like as musicians like we'll equip them with like songwriting tools and more like self-expression, and so like what is my voice as an artist in the context that we're in. Like, what do I want to say? What do we want to say? Like, giving them that agency and toolkit. And then in year four, focusing on leadership skills and giving the people who are in year four the chance to already be peer leaders for the people in year one. And we're starting a more sort of uninational, like intra-community approach, like just for seventh and eighth graders in East Jerusalem alone, and just for seventh and eighth graders in West Jerusalem alone. And again, talking about meeting people on their terms and helping people to feel really comfortable. And both communities have undergone so much trauma, particularly recently, that like there's so much work internally that needs to be done to help people come to the binational encounter more ready to
Mm.
like actually like have a healing and productive encounter and not a destructive one. And so we're going to start doing that work. And the peer leaders from the fourth year are going to be like running these uninational choirs. And so anyway, so we have this whole setup that we're building now, which is really, really exciting. But a lot of that really comes from Amer.
I love that you guys have come to this opportunity to like impact the kids at different levels. Is it because you've learned and you've noticed that it's easier for people to hear things the longer they've known each other and the more attached they are to each other, even though the outside world is telling them you're on opposite sides? With you guys, they're on the same level. They're learning, they're growing, they're seeing. Is that really why you went to the tier system?
Yeah, so the length of the process is so important. And that was something that we were doing before this. Like people would be in the chorus for years, right? Like Amer, joined at 16 and just never left, right? And like after high school, like the program looks a little bit different and is a little more ad hoc. And then he joined as like seven different staff roles and whatever. But like, and there are a lot of alumni actually who just never left, right? Even from our first year, like Alea, who's now our Palestinian coordinator and one of our facilitators and is our drummer, was at our very first rehearsal ever, and his claim to fame is that he just never left, right? And so there are a lot of people like this, but the long-term process is so vital, right, to creating actual relationships that are grounded in real life, right? That our singers actually grow up together. They actually like go to each other's like graduation party and will like meet each other's family and like they actually live life together. They'll be like, who wants to go skateboarding in Beit Safafa this weekend? And then people will be like, oh, I'll go. And then like, okay, we're meeting at like whatever, the Rosemary and blah, blah, blah. And like, this is where we're going to go. But just like being teenagers,
Mm-hmm.
right? So like that's really, really important. And we've been doing that all along. I think with the sort of cumulative four-year curriculum, that is a more structured way of thinking about the skills and the specific outcomes that we want people to have after 4 years and a confidence that we can pull off the recruiting to make it happen, right? Because it relies on the confidence that we'll be able to find enough ninth graders who want to join and not and be able to say to the 11th grader, sorry, like we love you and maybe there's something else for you, but like we're just focusing on ninth graders to join, right? Like that, we haven't been able to do that before. Just from a realistic perspective of like how many kids we were able to reach. So, but I think Amer in a lot of ways in his leadership and clearly like this year, like, has cracked the code in a lot of ways. So we're very excited to be sort of transitioning slowly into this new modality.
How does the music come about for you? Now, you're obviously a music teacher, you're a musician, you're a creator, but how does the music, because I had the chance to actually go and binge watch a lot of your stuff. including
Well,
your America's Got Talent piece.
yeah.
But the songs are so powerful, and I
Mm.
hope people get to listen to them and the words. How do they come about? Are they all your creation? Are they a combination of you and the kids? What is it?
So yeah, I love talking about our repertoire. It's like one of the really beautiful and sort of fun parts of the work is like what are the songs that we want to sing and like what kind of music are we going to teach and what do we want to make sure people know how to do musically, right? That's the fun part. And so we really think about our music in a super like multicultural way. So there are many choirs that are kind of like, oh, kind of a vibe and very sort of formal Western classical church vibes. And that's like the opposite of everything that we are. Um, we try as much as possible to decenter specific sort of formal hierarchical, this music is better than that music kind of nonsense and to really create a space where like the point is that we're singing in a group. That is something that is actually like something that basically all humans do and all cultures have in some way. And so we're trying to express that and see like how do we find the place where all these different traditions meet or some traditions meet and we can have a multifaceted repertoire. So not everything is everything for everyone. But like within a given concert or within a given song, we try to make sure that everyone feels represented in the ways that we can, right? And so again, not within every song. Some songs we just do like Nasam Alena al Hawa, like in Arabic, traditional way, khalas, right? Because that's an important thing. We don't also say no, but it also has to have Hebrew. Every song has to be a mix, blah, blah, blah. But we also have, and we have songs in Hebrew that are just like, this is a like religious song in Hebrew, and we just sing it in Hebrew in its own style. But then we do a lot of mashups and we do a lot of arrangements that kind of turn songs sort of on their heads or sort of like this song, but seen through the lens of this other musical tradition and style. And we love that. That's like my favorite thing to do, is to find these cool mashups and to see where different songs from different traditions and different languages, but maybe on the same theme, meet. Like, what does that sound like? If we're singing about freedom, like from these different perspectives, like, what does that sound like? And like figuring out literally how to mash up the songs in a sort of musical, technical, like music theory kind of way. But that also requires understanding like the different traditions, right?
Mm.
So one of the mashups that we did that I'm proudest of is a mashup of Asfur Tal Min Shubak with Round by a Jewish composer who set a sort of translation of a Mahmoud Darwish poem called A Million, and the Round is called A Million Nightingales. And I figured out how these two sort of went together, and ultimately there were a lot of kind of crazy things going on, but I figured out how, like, in many ways, like Asfur Tal Min Shubak is already fusion in and of itself, right? Because it's like Arabic traditional, but it's also jazz. And so how does that meet the choral thing and blah, blah, blah. And seeing like, oh, wow, you can like harmonize this like bayet moment with like a sharp nine, or it was just like super nerd stuff, but I love it. And it helps people the singers who come from these different musical backgrounds all feel like there's a place for them in the group musically, which is so important. That some of the stuff we do is different for everybody. Like when we were traveling to Japan, our first tour was to Japan. So we learned songs in Japanese that were like not from anybody's, home tradition in the chorus, but that has its own value, right? Of like everybody being equal strangers to something and then being like, it's an equalizing experience in a way, to like learn Japanese as someone coming from Jerusalem. But we also want to make sure that everyone feels like there's a space for their voice to be heard on their own terms in the chorus. So it's like we do a lot of improvisation. We have a lot of space for mawel. We do a lot of like mawel meeting sort of more like jazz, improvisational stuff. We do things with quarter tones. We do things with complicated harmonies. We do, things that are more like in the various African and African diasporic traditions. We do all kinds of stuff.
I love the fact that you have incorporated three languages, English, Arabic, and Hebrew, all into one dialect that they can understand each other. Like I
Yeah.
sat and listened to the music. I didn't understand some of the words when it came to Hebrew, but I could still feel the impact of the young person singing and
Yes.
just feel what they're portraying to us. So it's
Mm.
beautiful that you've combined these things to give us a way to show up a lot more in tune to each other. Really, that's the best thing that I got out of listening to all of this, besides the tears that I shed on the words that they were shared on a lot of it. Take me out of the course because you have also done projects where you've collaborated, it looks like across all kinds of genres,
Hmm.
combining them into these songs. I saw the Zoom meeting or whatever they were
Oh
that
yeah,
you
yeah,
had
yeah.
all these individuals.
Yeah.
What is that like to even bridge gaps, not just from Palestine and Israel, but also to the United States, for people to get
Yeah.
involved in something that, just like you said, we have lots of challenges everywhere in the world, and for
Of
us to
course.
start to connect. Take me through those pieces.
Totally. So one of the things that was really also sort of a revelation to me was, of course, around the 2016 US presidential election, where I was living in Jerusalem at the time. I was kind of trying to be going back and forth to see if I could come back to the US because that's where I personally felt at home without the chorus falling apart. And
Mm.
so that took 4 years with four different teams and four different institutional structures
Wow.
till that stuck, right? So again, I'm talking about like when I was talking about an unreasonable level of effort in order for things to succeed, like most normal people would have been like, this is too hard and I'm wasting my life on this and like khalas. But I was like, no, we're gonna make it work. So we're gonna try for year four, and do it again. And eventually, it worked and I was able, particularly in the pandemic, like to come back to the US. And I currently live in the US, even though I'm still doing JYC work full time. There's plenty to do, but really in collaboration with the folks who are on the ground. And I go several times a year and I take the group on tours and I work on these collabs and all kinds of other things. So like there's plenty. But that's really important. But before that, around the 2016 election, I was seeing the ways in which these patterns that had become so familiar to me with Israelis and Palestinians, I was starting to see between Americans and Americans. And I was like, I know what these are, and this is bad. Like this leads to lots of violence over many years. And of course, what I hadn't realized was the ways in which it came from a lot of violence over many years that I also hadn't been fully aware of. Right. But like
Mm.
it started getting me interested in looking at my own backyard using these same lenses. And that was revelatory. And after the 2016 election, as I was looking at the electoral maps, coming in and seeing like how much seemingly things weren't even this like red state, blue state situation, but it was really an urban rural divide where like even in the red states, like the big cities were blue, and even in the like blue states, the like rural areas were red, right? And with gradients, right? But like that fundamentally that was a trend. And I was like, wait a minute, I don't know anything about rural America.
Mm.
Anything, right? Having grown up in Washington, D.C., and then like gone to school in the Northeast and New Haven or whatever. And it's like, I don't know about like West Virginia. I don't know about Kentucky. I don't know about Idaho. and in these sort of much more different realities also that exist within America. Again, similar types of bubbles. And I saw that I wanted to learn. And so I wrote a Facebook post at the time, um, basically asking if I knew any musicians that worked in rural America,
Mm.
just like throwing it out into the universe. And a number of very interesting people responded, including a friend from college named Sage, who had been studying old time string band music in rural Tennessee, basically from folks who were like all Trump voters. But they were the bearers of this tradition that she loved as a fiddler and a clogger. And like these are the things that she wanted to study musically from these people who had everything not in common with her from a demographic, political, religious perspective, sociological, class, everything was different, basically. Um, but she had created these relationships through music. And so, anyway, we had a lot of long conversations. And she had started getting involved with an organization at the time called Better Angels, which was just getting started and basically doing like dialogue between Democrats and Republicans, like after the 2016 election, adults. And I was like, that's very interesting. And so I ended up at their first convention, the founding convention of Better Angels, now Braver Angels, and led music there and had all kinds of interesting experiences there that also mirrored in many ways like a lot of the dynamics that are happening around Israel Palestine, even at that time.
Mm.
And I was like, oh, there's a there. And so ultimately, Sage started a music team, for Braver Angels. And ultimately, when she went to law school, handed the torch to me and another number of incredible sort of musical change makers of different political persuasions. Um, and That's work then that I did sort of co-leading the Braver Angels music team for 4 years, in addition to my JYC work, as thinking about, okay, what are the ways that we can use music to bring America to see each other in its full, in one another's full humanity. And it's like a lot of the same stuff. We didn't have a choir per se because we were scattered all over the country, but we were working with like singer-songwriters, and working with artists of conscience of different kinds and doing song contests, and ultimately created a Braver Angels songwriting workshop, which is essentially in a lot of ways the same as like the collaborative songwriting work we do in JYC. Like we sort of all these things sort of feed on each other because there's certain best practices that just work, right?
Mhm.
And you accommodate for context, but there's certain things that like humans do, right? And so if you get people together in a space and you create ground rules and you create respect and trust and you use music to do that, and then you're like, okay, we're going to create some stuff and then see what comes and then like sing it together, like that works. So we were doing that work also in the context of US polarization. Um, and there was a lot of work I was doing in the pandemic on a whole variety of different topics around race, around the environment, around like interfaith stuff, around all different kinds of things in the US, internationally, et cetera, using these same tools, and they work. And so fundamentally, I think really what we need is for folks to invest in this,
Mhm.
right? Because like people, then you have things like the US Surgeon General talking about the sort of loneliness epidemic, or the fact that and in many ways, music is a glue, like is a tool that evolved to connect people,
Mhm.
like to connect hearts directly, right? That's what music is for, evolutionarily, for communities, for human beings, for tribes, for society, like in like really thinking about what is the way that human society evolved. Music was this glue from day one. There are theories of like whether humans actually started singing before they were speaking, right? There's just like really interesting stuff about like the primal nature of what it means to be in harmony with somebody. And So these are things that are just so vital, but then you have people being like, oh, how do we like combat this thing? And it's like, hello, it's like staring you in the face. But like in the US, we decide not to invest in the arts because they're soft or like unimportant or like should be covered by somebody else, or we don't want to pay taxes or like whatever it is. And then people have no community and then are like, what do we do? And it's like, hello, like we've been here doing this work and be severely underfunded and undercovered by like media also as like we're like the like human interest story, but not like the news, right? And so how a lot of this, I think a lot of this is about like how do we get people to see that this is actually vital, that it's not like a nice frill that you can do, but it's like this is actually vital to our survival as a species and a planet, is to like find ways to meet each other as human beings in our full humanity. Otherwise, we're screwed. And we're seeing that now. And hopefully it's not too late. That's all I'll say.
It's not too late. You're out there doing the work along with a lot of incredible young individuals. And it's drop the mic moment, Micah, honestly,
Thank you.
that we need to fund the creatives because it's a way of reaching individuals at a level that you cannot reach them in arguing, in preaching, in any other way, but to allow them to connect and really begin to see each other's humanity. And you said it, music does that. That's
Yep.
why across the world, people listen to all kinds of music. Sometimes they don't even understand the words that are being
Right.
spoken, but they're
But you
sitting there listening.
feel the emotion. You
Yes.
like go on that journey, even if you're like, I have no idea what you're singing. Like I have a and this is sort of again me like nerding out sort of ethnomusicologically whatever, but like I create these like hours and hour long playlists and most of the songs are in languages that I don't speak,
I listen to a lot
but
of
like
Indian music.
I find the like energy of the song and I'm just like, oh, and then this one like transitions into this one perfectly in the musical whatever, and it's like I don't know what that song's about, but in like a lot of ways I do know what it's about, right? Even if I can't name the specific context or the characters or like what's happening in verse two, but like I can feel the sadness or the joy or the striving or the whatever it is. It's fun. Music has this awesome way of doing that.
Before we go much further, how do people connect with you? Because I have a feeling there's lots of people that would love to get on the page of creating music. And I think you have a company that's doing that
Mhm.
now, right? Please, how do
Yeah,
they
so
reach
there are
you?
many different avenues of engaging. I'd say my website is just micahhendler.com, MICAHHENDLER.com. Has a contact form and also a variety of different ways of of sort of connecting with the work, whether it's with the Jerusalem Youth Chorus specifically, or with the community sings that I lead in Washington, or to suggest like a workshop. I do facilitation, I do musical facilitation, I do all kinds of other things and keynotes and you know writing and all different kinds of things. I'll write you a song, like whatever whatever is the way that sort of feels authentic and important and helpful. So that's an easy way to get in touch with me. Um, with the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, we have obviously our own website that we've put a lot of work into, jerusalemyouthchorus.org. And that page has so many different options. We are, as I was mentioning, I was talking about funding. We're obviously severely underfunded, and there's so much demand. There's so much that we can do and grow into this scale. Like we're trying to become a singing youth movement. This is another part of like Amer's vision that I love. That he's like, look, right now we're like one ensemble, but we need to grow into a youth movement. I was like, hell yeah. So, but obviously that takes like 10xing our budget, right? So like we have a long ways to go in that regard, but definitely financial support will be incredible. And then also like follow us on social media, look at our YouTube videos, follow us on Spotify, like share videos, share our TED Talk, share the America's Got Talent performance with your community. Like there are ways in which our music can be disarming. Like often people who may come in a way of being like, nah, I don't believe that, or like I'm very judgy, suspicious of like whatever you're doing. It can't possibly be authentic and real. It's all propaganda. And then you see the kids singing and like showing that they actually have relationships with each other and are doing it under these like insane circumstances, and you can't not believe it. Like you can, but like then I think the problem is with you and not with us. Like to say, like to be so hurt and to be so skeptical that you're like, I can't believe anything like this, I would say is so much damage that the situation does to so many of us to like put us in these sort of places where we're like, no, I can't see anything. I can't hear anything. It's too threatening to the way that I view the world because I've had to build all these walls around myself to protect myself. Like it makes sense, but at a certain point, like we're putting out everything that we can to show that this is real and worth investing in. So there are lots of different ways of getting engaged and getting involved, and we're really grateful for that.
I hope you're going to have a ton of individuals that are going to venture with you to grow this, because I personally feel that this is a great way for us to connect as humans and as a planet, honestly,
Yes.
because that movement is needed everywhere. We're not
Yes.
separate. There's nobody that's separate on this planet. We're all connected. We're all one. And you
Yeah.
guys talk about that a lot. So I hope there's going to be incredible human beings that are going to go, this is exactly where we need to be investing our time and energy and our funding.
There you are.
I would love, love, love to know how much this experience so far has altered you.
Hmm. So many ways. I think the most interesting thing, I think for me, has been the ways in which I've felt that I've become more myself
Hmm?
in the process of doing this work. So less altered me in some sort of way that then is like, oh, I was on one path and now I'm on this different path. But I feel like I've just been sort of finding my way to my path, which is doing this, right? So there have obviously been all these different turning points. Like I was talking about the first time I did dialogue, or the first time I started a singing group, or the first time that I, learned Arabic or learned Arabic music and learned that like what a quarter tone is and that it's a thing, or like, there's been so many different points in the road, or learning that people join the chorus for reasons that are different than like I would start it or different than someone would fund it, right? There are all these inflection moments where I learned how to run an organization or not run an organization, moments where I learned how to, engage in like institutional diplomacy or deal with contracts or like all these things that, I had to really mess up in a lot of ways first in order to like then sort of get on the right path. But I think a lot of it has also been in seeing the world through so many different sets of eyes and through so many different lives, and having experiences that like have given me the ability to meet people where they are, because I have a better sense maybe of where they're coming from than the other people that are around them sometimes, because I took the time to listen, right? Or I took the time to do my homework and like know when they say a particular word, like maybe it actually is hinting at something else that they're not sure if they can say,
Mm.
right? Is this like a safe space where I can like say this word, or are you going to judge me? Or are you going to get me fired? Or any number of other things, right, that are happening right now in the US. Like so many friends are so scared right now to be honest, to tell the truth for fear that they'll lose friendships, that they'll lose their job, they'll lose their community. They'll get expelled from school, like whatever it is. They'll, in some cases, like be prosecuted or persecuted or both. Um, and there's a way in which through all of this journeying, I've just tried to be open and be a sort of a safe space for people, to be themselves and to be honest and to feel like they have a home in our relationship, and that they don't have to like be something they're not in order for me to think they're like okay as a human. And I think that is like a kind of fundamental learning, that most people just like want to live normal lives and have the opportunity to do that. And that's actually a really shared, not just interest, but like shared value and shared need. And if we are able to meet each other on the level of needs instead of getting stuck in these like level of positions, these positions that are artificially constructed to be in conflict with each other, if we're able to see that actually maybe it's everybody's need to be able to raise children in a world that isn't on fire in every way, then maybe there would be new opportunities that emerge for us to work together to actually get there, instead of being like, no, but your solution is bad. And actually, you're part of the problem. And actually, you don't even want to have a normal life. And it's like, what are you talking about? But like, that's the state of politics right now in so many ways. Is that if someone disagrees with me, then they're evil and hate humanity. And it's just like, whoa. It's like you can have like opinions that I think are wrong, that are maybe even dangerous, that need to be stopped. Fine, but like, have you talked to me? Like, do you know what I think about humanity, or are you just assuming me because I made that post that used that word that you think means all these other things about this unrelated issue? So I try to, be a place, and a person who can just kind of create openness and honesty and trust. That's really the using music, using listening, using whatever tools I have at my disposal.
I wish I could clone you
Hmm.
into lots
Well,
of
I
people.
feel like Rima, I feel like we're both on this path
We
together.
are
So
definitely on that
very
path.
grateful for that.
I would like to know, because the chorus comes from lots of conflict areas, how do you maintain your own mental health when you see things that sometimes you can't fix them. You just
Yeah.
can't fix them. And how do you not get bitter and keep
Yeah.
the positivity?
It's a really important question. I mean, for me, it's because the work that we're doing has the privilege, I would say, of coming from a creation of an alternative kind of approach. Like we are not, and there are many different kinds of change that are needed, and I believe are all needed in tandem in order to like get to the results that we want. You need the people who are banging down the doors and saying like, no, this like policy needs to change. And you need the people who are on the inside trying to draft the new policy. And you need the people who are like thinking about like what are the ways that we could have a new whatever. And then you need the people building the new thing, right? And you need all of that. And of course, so much of our world is also focused where like the people who are like banging down the door think that all the people on the inside are part of the problem. And it's like, no, you need someone to catch the ball when you throw it to them and they can run with it. You don't know how to write a bill, or like whatever it is, you know. with the chorus, we are aware of our space in this work, primarily being of the sort of creating an alternative and then like shining that out into the world and being like, what if we all did this? Right? Rather than saying our role is to be at every single protest and like take a position on every legislative issue anywhere that is unjust. You know what I mean? Like that is exhausting. And I have so much respect and admiration and gratitude for the people who do that and who can do that. But I think it also takes different types of people to do different types of work. And I think that's okay. It's in fact necessary. And one of the things that is a challenge, I think, is when folks think that only the way that they're doing the work is the only legitimate way of being useful to an issue. I think that's also a divide and conquer tactic used by people who want the issue not to be changed at all, right? It's sort of dividing the like resist people against the recreate people against the reform people, right? But I am able to stay so positive about this because I get to work with the kids and I see this working, right? And I knew going into it that if I set as my goal, like I'm going to fix everything, then I would just be depressed all the time because I can't do that. I don't have the power to do that. Even the chorus, even a singing youth movement, doesn't have the power to change everything. Even just for Israelis and Palestinians, not even talking about like global warming or whatever, but like even just for Israelis and Palestinians, we don't have the power to alone to change everything, but we can be part of an ecosystem of change. And there are many people who are doing these other types of work, and we're thinking, okay, how do we support them? Right? So we go to events where we know that our voices really can be heard and make a difference and be heard in the right way, and in a way that will also be like healthy for the kids, right? Like we're not going to put them in like physical harm, in danger, and they're already taking so many risks by just showing up. But we are able in so many ways to stay in this space of hope and positivity, but that's grounded in doing the work, right? It's not just like we should be hopeful. It's like, okay, thank you for that. But we're doing it because like the reality that we've created in microcosm within the chorus is what we want the world to look like, and we've sustained it and we can sustain it. And so we're like, okay, like what if things looked like this? That would be awesome. And then we use the music as a way of reaching millions of people with that message that like there is an alternative, right? Like so much of the violence that's happening right now is happening because people think there's no choice. They're like, look, I hate war, but like you're trying to kill me. And so all I can do is fight back. And not understanding that that's like a false dichotomy because again in so many ways like normal Israelis and Palestinians want to have normal lives, and the way for most people to get that is through a just peaceful resolution of things in a way that isn't going to be perfect for everybody but is better than this, right? But the extremists on both sides are benefiting from the violence and from each other, right? They're like the extremists on both sides need each other and need to keep the people traumatized and divided against one another in order for them to stay in power in their own societies. So you have like all these things. And so with the chorus, we're able to stay in this space of, y'all, like we actually are doing a thing and like we all can do this, which is very hopeful because I'm working with the kids and seeing it in microcosm. And I don't think that like my responsibility single-handedly is to like fix everything because then I'd be depressed all the time and never get out of bed.
Woo! Beautifully said. Beautifully said. Micah, if, not if, because you are in front of a stage and it's a stage to the world and to the kids, what would you love to say to all of them? Starting fresh, and we have the opportunity to make things better. What would you love to say to these kids that feel like the world is on their shoulder and they need to move forward?
So like to the participants in the chorus, basically.
And the ones that are looking in to go,
And oh, and like potential people who might
yes, yeah,
join.
yes, that are
Okay.
looking, going, I don't know about this.
I would just say that fundamentally the chorus is a home and is a home for everybody. And we love you as you are and want your voice to be heard in your honest truths to the world. And we're creating a platform that is as big as we can for your voice to have an impact in the world. And that's really what we're doing. And we think that can be done most powerfully together. And we've seen that to be the case. And so, ahlan wa sahlan, yani, basically.
Love it. My last question. How has this impacted you and your family?
Hmm. Yeah, coming back to the source, it's been a real journey with my family. As I mentioned, like my family in a lot of ways was the source of a lot of my one-sided education about the Middle East.
Which,
And
let's
without
clarify, they
them
didn't know
knowing,
any better. That's
yeah,
what
no,
they've
exactly.
learned.
It's not because they decided that they were going to do this propaganda thing. It was like that was their experience
Mhm.
also. And they didn't know in a lot of cases. And so much of this is perpetuated because, again, like if I hadn't had this dialogue experience, I would be in a completely different headspace,
Mhm.
right? In so many ways, like people think a lot of the sort of activists, who are basically like, well, you'll just see how horrible it is and change your mind, or like you'll just see the error of your ways if I yell at you more about it. And it's like that's usually not how human beings are persuaded to really believe something, right? But for me, it's been a really long and beautiful, hard and beautiful journey with my family, particularly to see the ways in which we've used the dialogue skills in our own relationship. And at this point, like so many elements of my family have been so supportive of the chorus, even who initially may not only have been skeptical, but may have been kind of threatened in some ways, perhaps, by what we were doing. At this point, particularly like my mom, who had very, very strong opinions and still has strong opinions, um, has been able to, through our sort of working this through in our own relationship and my introducing her to like Amer and like so many other people and like bringing her around the West Bank and like all in Jerusalem. And my mom knows almost every kid who's been in the chorus,
Mm.
right? My dad as well. And they are part of the chorus family and come on every tour and like are just there, being there for everybody and hear their stories and hear their realities. And like my mom, who initially, like when I first went to Seeds of Peace, sent me with a book called Myths and Facts that was like talk about propaganda, like, whoa, right? And she didn't know that. She was just like, here's some stuff that you should know. And like when someone says this, you can like say this. Like literally, I went with this book, armed with this book. I kept it in my suitcase because I was ashamed of it, but I had it. And like I knew the things that were in it. That's what I knew. She, on this last tour, one of our singers, Adam, who's a Palestinian teenager in our group right now, got COVID, and my mom also ended up getting COVID. And so the two of them were like quarantining together in this like basically we were all off doing whatever rehearsal or shopping or music video or whatever, and my mom and Adam were just like sitting there in this room with COVID and talking. And Adam's English like wasn't very good. My mom doesn't speak Arabic. My mom's Hebrew is like minimal also, but they were like making it work. And Adam has a really hard situation. like he's been arrested. He was like accused of throwing stones and was arrested and beaten by the soldiers and all this stuff. He's like 15, right? And like he and my mom are like having this conversation and he's like sharing his story and like that's powerful stuff. And my mom like loves Adam, right? And is just like, and he's so sweet. And like that stuff changes you, right? And that's not the first and won't be the last conversation like that that my mom has. And everyone feels so safe around her because she's the one who's just like taking everybody to the doctor, on tour. Like she's literally like my dad also like has taken, I think he's taken Amer to the hospital on like 3 different international tours at midnight, like consistently, right? To the point where like it's now a thing, right? So it's like that's how you build relationships, right? Where you're like actually there for each other and then you become part of each other's lives and it changes you.
Beautifully said, because you're no longer Jewish, you're no longer Palestinian, you're one person reacting
Exactly.
to someone else really being present.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you'd like to say that I haven't asked you? Because I could sit here for hours and we can talk, but I
You've
know how
asked
late it
many
is.
amazing questions, Rima. I feel
Anything you'd
I
like to
feel
say?
good. I feel
Great.
good.
Thank
Just
you
yeah,
so much.
I just sort of encourage everybody that like this is actually doable. Like this now just like for random listeners of the podcast, like you can do this in your community, in your family, in your neighborhood, in your backyard, in your, religious community. Like there's a lot of work to be done, but you don't have to be professional to actually start to change the tide. So I'd issue that challenge and invitation to folks to, yeah, try it on, see how you like it.
And it doesn't matter what we think the issue is,
Yeah,
truly.
totally. Totally. Because this is now just the way that humans are thinking that we need to relate to each other on anything, and it's not working.
Micah, I love you. I really appreciate you showing up, being fully yourself, and all the things that you're contributing to these young individuals and really making an impact. It's definitely made a difference for me to even desire to push this out so much for more kids to see this, to see that there is a different way. So I thank you for
Yeah,
that. And
thank
to
you.
our incredible viewers and listeners, please remember our attitude always determines our altitude. Thank you again, and I love you again, and we'll see you in the next podcast.
Thanks so much, Rima.
Hold on to me as we go, as we roll down this unfamiliar road. Although this way is taking us along, just know you're not alone, 'cause I'm gonna make this place your home. Don't pay no mind to the demons, they fill you with fear. Trouble, it might drag you down. If you get lost, you can always be found. Just know you're not alone.
you a group. We are the Jerusalem Youth Chorus, a group of Palestinians and Israelis. We believe through music and through working together and talking to each other, we are taking a step forward into building that amazing future where there is justice and there is freedom and there is equality and there is inclusion.
What would you do with $1 million if you would win?
We will create more spaces just like these choruses so people can meet people that are different from them so we can create this change.
I had like goosebumps a little bit. It sounded beautiful, you're harmonizing together. It was incredible.
I got those same goosebumps. This is a world anthem. We all live on this planet together, and thank you so much for appearing on that stage.
Spectacular, heartwarming. The voices are amazing. It was inspiring. I mean, what a treat.
I love this audition. You made something very complicated, beautiful through friendship.
Would you like to start the voting?
I most certainly would with a yes.
Yes!
You get your 4th yes from me.
That was really good.
Beautiful.
Yeah, powerful.
Let me tell you something. You guys symbolize so much for so many right now. Thank you for being here. Thank you.